Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a fantastic day. My name is Kmart, and I want to talk about some basketball. And today, we are talking about the Brooklyn Nets and what is going on with them in terms of their current position now as they enter, or maybe we should say re enter, a sort of rebuilding mode in the wake of the Mikal Bridges trade. So, we're going to talk about how that process might play out for them as the Nets are rebuilding once again. This is a process that they started after breaking up their sort of big three, Durant, Irving, and James Harden. Now they are sort of restarting it or going back to it after trading Mikal Bridges away to the New York Knicks. So, whether this constitutes a new rebuild or just the continuation of the previous one is really more of a semantics argument, but the point is the Nets are entering a rebuild here, and the good news for them is that they are not even remotely starting from scratch here, right? They do have a little bit of a kickstart in this rebuilding process. They've got a pretty sizable amount of incoming extra picks from the trades that sent away some of those stars, right? Durant and Irving in particular. Plus, you've got a further batch of incoming picks from the deal that sent Mikal Bridges away. So the Nets have a little stockpile of sort of future assets and draft capital to work with right from the start here, which obviously becomes incredibly important when a team's attempting to rebuild like this. In terms of assets on the roster right now, the Nets do have some long-term pieces to work with, starting first and foremost with Nick Claxton, the guy that they just re-signed this offseason, got him for a 4-year deal. So I will admit, Nick Claxton has never been a huge scorer in terms of his offensive numbers, but he has effectively been the anchor for the Nets on the interior, especially over the past 2 seasons where he's really sort of come into his own in that role. Over these last 2 seasons, he's averaged double figures, he's averaged over 9 rebounds, and he has shot incredibly well from the field. Last year it was 62%. The year before that, I think it was just over 70% in terms of his field goal percentage. So he has been reliable, he has been efficient. That's exactly what the Nets kind of want in this rebuilding process. In terms of maybe an asset on the perimeter instead of inside, they do also have Cam Johnson signed through the end of 2027, I believe. In his 2 seasons in Brooklyn, he's averaged 14.3 points and shot 38.5% from 3. So, like Claxton, his scoring numbers have not been massive. They're not going to immediately attract attention, but he's been a reliable option on the wing. 38.5% from 3 still puts him among some of the better shooters in the league from outside. So someone that they can look to for a little bit of help on the offensive end. Obviously, he's not going to carry the team by himself, but he can still make contributions. And speaking of contributions, the Nets have a slew of players in the short term who might still have something left to contribute to the Nets, or some gas in the tank, some motivation here towards the end of their contracts to try and come in and put up some good numbers, right? First on that list, and the guy who's been on the list for basically the past 2 or 3 seasons for Brooklyn, Ben Simmons. Is this finally the year that we see him fully healthy? He's played something along the lines of like 55 games for the Nets over the past 3 or 4 seasons, which is obviously not great, but he's in the final year of his deal. I think everybody at this point would like to see a full season of Ben Simmons playing, just so we actually get to see it. But he is someone that could help the Nets in the short term. Meanwhile, you've got guys on expiring deals like Bogdanovich, like Dennis Schroeder, who could be looking for that next contract, might give them some extra motivation for this upcoming season. You've also got a guy like Dorian FinneySmith, who technically is not expiring. He has a player option next season, but might be in a position where he's looking to cash in, right? Play well enough to get maybe a bigger contract than what his player option would pay out for him. And then the final sort of member of this sort of short-term group of guys is Cam Thomas. He's in the final year of his rookie deal. He's coming off of a season where he averaged 22.5 points on 44.2% shooting. So he's looking to play well enough to get paid now, right? Look for that first sort of big contract after his rookie deal. So if any of those guys produce for the Nets, if any of those guys are players that Brooklyn feels could or should be a part of this roster moving forward in this rebuild, then you have the option of negotiating with them, of attempting to re-sign them long term. If not, almost all of them are coming off the Nets books after this season anyway, right? Ben Simmons, Bogdanovich, Schroeder, and Cam Thomas are all in the final year of their deals. They represent a combined $76.3 million that would be coming off of the books for the Nets. As I mentioned, FinneySmith not included in there because he does have a player option, but he is another 14 or 15 million that could potentially end up off of the Nets books as well, depending on whether he accepts his player option. So a lot of financial flexibility coming up for the Nets if they choose not to keep any of those guys. If they really are 100% sure that they don't want one or more of those players, there is also the possibility that the Nets move them, right? Guys with some experience like Bogdanovich and Schroeder in particular feel like guys that you could maybe trade to a team looking to, move up into playoff contention, or maybe move out of the sort of 7 through 10 area for the play-in. Someone who wants to bring in a veteran player like Bogdanovich or Schroeder, you could maybe grab yourself a pick or something like that. And if the Nets don't have any intention of re-signing those guys anyway, you might as well get something for them. So options for the Nets in terms of short-term value from those players, whether they keep them or not. Personally, I think the priority in terms of keeping anyone among those players that I mentioned is probably going to be Cam Thomas. He came on strong at the end of the 22-23 season, and he followed that up with a campaign where he put up strong numbers. As I said, this last season, he averaged 22.5 points and shot over 44% from the field. So I think he's proven that he can do it over an extended amount of time, and it wasn't just a flash in the pan, and the Nets should try to keep him at this point. Now, I will admit, a trio of Cam Thomas, Nick Claxton, and Cam Johnson is not exactly set to immediately make noise in the East, right? This is not a trio that's going to be setting the world on fire anytime soon. But I believe it represents what could be a stable core to move forward with in terms of a rebuild. I think that those three guys are players that you could slot around someone if and when the Nets find them, right? They're not superstars. I think you'd be hard-pressed to even really make an all-star case for any of them, but you know what you're going to get for the most part with those three players. And as I said, there's a group of guys you could slot around an incoming player regardless of that player's experience level. If the Nets go out and bundle all these picks together and make a trade for a superstar, then you have those three guys as a supporting cast to play around that star. If you use your pick and you find, your star of the future in the draft, either this year, next year, what have you, then it represents a group of guys who, again, are not star players, but produce well enough to give whatever that incoming draft pick is a stable sort of group of guys to play around and hopefully develop quickly into that star player that Brooklyn wants. So I think they're in a pretty good position right now. It is slightly bittersweet, I suppose, for the Nets, right? They took a big swing with that big three era of Durant and Irving and Harden. Didn't really work out for them. They thought maybe they could salvage some sort of shortcut back to contention with Mikal Bridges, and that's now done after basically a season and a half. So things have not worked out the way that the Nets and their fans might have wanted. But even with that being said, the Nets are in a good position right now to build up something and find a path back to being a competitive team without having to really bottom out and drop into the basement of the NBA and go into full-on tank mode. And I think that's the most important thing here for the Nets. They're in the rebuild situation no matter what, but you're looking at a scenario where instead of having a 3 to 5 year period where you are absolutely terrible, you're looking at instead maybe a period of 2 to 3 years of being just okay, right? So a situation where the Nets spend 2 or 3 years maybe being something like the 10th or 11th seed in the Eastern Conference, as opposed to 3 to 5 years of being 14th or 15th. For some people, that may not make much of a difference because you're not making the playoffs either way, but I think it's a shorter and smoother path back to being a semi-competitive team compared to where they would be otherwise, where you would be if you were basically a team like Detroit or Charlotte, where you're just at the absolute bottom. So I don't know. The Nets, it's not an ideal situation after the big swing that they took, but it's the best that they're going to get right now. So that's all I got. What do you think? Do you believe that the Nets should keep any of those guys that I was talking about, right? Simmons, Bogdanovich, Schroeder, Cam Thomas. Who among those guys do you think the Nets should be considering as someone to move forward with long term, if any of them? And where do you think the expectations for the Nets should be this season? Do you think they could compete for a play-in spot? Do you believe that they might just end up sort of a bottom 5 team playing for a lottery pick, or somewhere in between? But either way, please feel free to let me know what you think. But other than that, thank you all so much for watching, and I will talk to you later.